Who stands to benefit from the Syrian air base attack and the potential war that will come from it? A lot of people. The MSM has promoted a dishonest narrative in Syria since the war began there. They recently claimed that Bashar al-Assad gassed women and children with chemical weapons in the city of Idlib. However, there is still no proof that Assad was responsible for the attack. And yet they use this to their advantage. Undoubtedly, the mainstream media has been a tool to propagate a war against Assad.
There is no doubt in the minds of U.S. military and intelligence analysts that Bashar al-Assad's regime did carry out this attack.
We know they have weapons of mass destruction. We know they have active programs. There isn't any debate about it.
Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Beyond any doubt that the Syrian regime has used chemical weapons.
There should be no doubt Saddam's ability to produce and deliver weapons of mass destruction.
There is, quote, no doubt Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad gassed his own people.
Do you have any evidence that Saddam Hussein or his agents played a role in the September 11th terrorist attacks, or that he has links to al-Qaeda?
Well, as I note in my statement, there's no doubt that there have been contacts and linkages to the al-Qaeda organization.
There is no doubt who is responsible for this heinous use of chemical weapons in Syria. The Syrian regime.
One of the most worrisome things that emerges from the thick intelligence file we have on Iraq's biological weapons
Well, there's no doubt in our mind that the Syrian regime under the leadership of Bashar al-Assad is responsible for this horrific attack.
Seemingly overnight, the mainstream media went from Trump's worst enemy to his best friend.
And they are beautiful pictures of fearsome armaments making what is for them a brief flight over to this airfield.
You know something is very wrong when Trump's sworn foes in the media and politics become his biggest fans with just one missile launch. We heard interviews and press statements from Hillary, Nancy Pelosi, John McCain, and Angela Merkel endorsing the president's actions. Something is very strange here. The question is, why is a war with Syria being ramped up now, just as Donald Trump begins his term? The answer is that there are many, many entities who stand to benefit directly from a war.
The world will not waver. Assad must go.
There are some who have long wanted Assad's ouster, like Hillary Clinton. An article in The Intercept revealed that as president, Hillary Clinton was planning a full-scale invasion of Syria with U.S. boots on the ground. Why? To overthrow Assad. A second document from Hillary Clinton's email archive on WikiLeaks may provide us with additional information. It states that the war against Bashar al-Assad was ultimately about Israel's national interests and protecting Israel's monopoly on nuclear weapons. The email also states that the goal in Syria is regime change and the installation of a Syrian leader who will be favorable to Washington. If that isn't telling enough to you, then I don't know what is. While I am not a fan of Assad, without a doubt, this WikiLeaks proves that he is being targeted. Just hours before the strike, Hillary Clinton gave an interview where she said that the U.S. needed to attack the airfields in Syria. Hillary seemed to have prior knowledge of the bombing.
In the last few days. And I really believe that we should have and still should take out his airfields and prevent him from being able to use them to bomb innocent people and drop sarin gas on them. So
the Islamic State will inevitably benefit from the strike. In recent days, ISIS has lost significant ground in the war after the Syrian army retook the city of Aleppo and portions of the countryside. The strike means that Assad now has another front to his war, this one an aerial campaign from the United States. If Trump takes out Assad, he will actually promote the advancement of ISIS. Israel is another entity that would greatly benefit from an overthrow of Assad. Israel has cheered for a U.S. military intervention for quite some time now, and it seems they have prepared for one as well. Just 2 weeks ago, Israel planned a massive contingency evacuation at its northern border. This article from squawker.org mentions that Israeli Defense Forces practiced the evacuation of 250,000 people living near the Golan Heights. Financially, there could be a major stake in this attack for natural gas companies, as there are 2 proposals on the table from Russia and the U.S. to run a pipeline through Syria and northern Iraq. Of course, Assad will favor the Russian proposal. The natural gas industry and shareholders in the United States stand to profit enormously from the overthrow of Assad, as does Saudi Arabia, which has a major stake in the U.S. proposal. Just recently, Donald Trump met with a delegation of Texas oil companies, specifically about Syria. It appears oil and natural gas seek to make a profit from Trump's airstrike. This 1983 CIA document further reinforces the notion that the fight for Syria is at least partially about a pipeline. The CIA configured a scheme that involved multiple parties, including Israel, to bring down Syria at the time. It suggests that the CIA was working covertly alongside Israel and Turkey to promote regime change. John McCain has been a top cheerleader for Assad's ouster and a full war with Iran and Russia, despite the fact that a majority of Americans don't agree with him. Approximately 1.5 months ago, John McCain made a secret trip to Syria. The nature of his visit isn't known. McCain previously went to Syria in 2013 to meet with the so-called moderate rebels. His visit came just 3 months before the August 2013 chemical weapons attack that would kill over 1,000 people. No doubt the timing of this trip is very odd indeed. Neocons have lusted for an attack on Assad for many years. Just 3 weeks ago, Consortium News published an article that a neocon family known as the Kagans were re-engaging in lobbying efforts for the sole purpose of getting the U.S. involved in a war with Syria and overthrowing Assad. Both Robert and Frederick Kagan penned op-ed columns for the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, calling for expanded military interventions against Syria and Russia. The Kagans are a family with deep financial and diplomatic ties to Israel. Lastly, just 1 week before the Syrian attack, the State Department announced a major policy switch in Syria. Rex Tillerson, a former major oil company executive, said that the United States would no longer call for the ouster of Bashar Assad. And then 1 week later, Assad uses chemical weapons. How convenient. Wouldn't Assad maybe think this was a bad idea to do, right after the U.S. softened its foreign policy stance?
Major reversal in America's policy on the Syrian civil war. Today, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson signaled that the U.S. will no longer insist on the removal of Syria's dictator, Bashar al-Assad.
This is a globalist setup. The mainstream media is nothing more than an outlet for the elites to spread propaganda to the masses. The next move is boots on the ground, and the American people don't want it, but the elites do. They'll use the media to indoctrinate the masses until a full-fledged war is underway. The deception of the mainstream media was exposed by independent journalist Eva Bartlett at a 2016 press conference regarding the situation in Syria. Bartlett claimed that the MSM is intentionally falsifying the narrative in order to promote regime change.
Thank you very much. I'm Christopher Ronneberg with the Norwegian newspaper Aftenposten. A question for, or 2 questions for Ms. Bartlett here. As a journalist, I'm sure you can appreciate getting other impressions than empirical impressions from the ground. When you talk about the Syrian people and what the Syrian people want, how can you quantify that? Do you have any independent surveys where you can actually document that? And secondly, you talk about the corporate media, the Western media, the lies, and all of this. Could you explain what you think might be the agenda from us in the Western media, and why we should lie, why the international organizations on the ground should lie, why we shouldn't believe all these absolutely documentable facts that we see from the ground, these hospitals being bombed, these civilians who are talking about the atrocities that they have been experiencing. How can you justify calling all of us liars?
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, there are certainly honest journalists amongst the very compromised establishment media. Let's start with your second question. So, international organizations on the ground. Tell me which ones are on the ground in eastern Aleppo. Yeah, okay, I'll tell you, there are none. There are none. These organizations are relying on the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is based in Coventry, UK, and which is one man. They're relying on compromised groups like the White Helmets, which, let's talk about the White Helmets. The White Helmets were founded in 2013 by a British ex-military officer. They have been funded to the tune of $100 million by the US, UK, and Europe and other states. They purport to be rescuing civilians in eastern Aleppo and Idlib, yet no one in eastern Aleppo has heard of them. And I say no one, bearing in mind that now 95% of these areas of eastern Aleppo are liberated. They purport to be rescuing civilians in eastern Aleppo and Idlib, yet no one in eastern Aleppo has heard of them. The White Helmets purport to be neutral, yet they can be found carrying guns and standing on the dead bodies of Syrian soldiers. And their video footage actually contains children that have been recycled in different reports. So you can find a girl named Aya who turns up in a report in month, say, August, and she turns up in the next month in 2 different locations. So they are not credible. The SOHR is not credible. Unnamed activists are not credible. Once or twice, maybe, but every time, not credible. So your sources on the ground, you don't have them. As for your agenda, not your, but the agenda of some corporate media, it is the agenda of regime change.